I think there are still some people who are having the rest of their lunch, so we should probably fill up a little bit, but we should get going because in the interest of time, we're already a large way through the first session. My name is Patricia Lewis. I'm the Research Director here at Chatham House for International Security. And this session is on a very now topic, which is on the Internet of Things, and particularly Nominet and the Internet of Things. And we're very fortunate to have Brian Marshall, who is an engineer who in a former life used to look at the ways in which winds flew over forests and look to protect trees. And so we like him already. And then went into video gaming and selling video and publishing video games, and has got into the whole issue of the Internet of Things. He's a technical person as a mechanical engineer. So what I want to do is hear Brian speak. Welcome back. I want to hear Brian speak, and if it's appropriate, if anyone has any questions, I think Brian would happily take a couple, but we do have to move straight on then into the parallel session. So, Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm Brian. So I'm a research fellow at Nominet R&D, and my role there is to lead Nominet's investigation of Internet of Things and smart cities, incorporating new technologies such as TV white space along the way. So, to give hang on, here we go, we juggle. To give you a bit of background, Nominet R&D believes in, yes, as the picture shows, lots of people thinking seriously about hard and complex problems, but we also passionately believe in applied research and learning by doing, rolling our sleeves up and getting our hands dirty. And the Internet of Things is one of these areas about 18 months ago we knew very little about. So in true applied research manner, we felt we needed to run some experiments by tackling real tangible problems. And this talk is about some of those lessons that we've learned by working on these projects. And in the process, we've built a whole IoT stack from sensor to application user interfaces. And importantly, using technology from today, not tomorrow. So, I'm not quite sure what that's about. Just to reassure you and be absolutely clear, this is not the usual IoT talk of big numbers and hockey stick graphs. This is going to be about what you can do with IoT on the ground today. Hello. Okay.
This is how the Internet of Things will work,
exactly.
By the way.
There's a bit of juggling going on here. So the first lesson is really quite simple, and that's try to find a real problem to work on, rather than come up with one for another connected gadget or another connected toaster or something, just for the sake of it. And as it turns out, Nominet HQ is in Oxford, a city that suffers badly from flooding in the south and the west of the city all too frequently. Last winter in 2014, the floods cut off two of the main roads that come into the city, and it's caused an estimated 50 million quid's worth of economic loss. So we happened to come across a chap called Ben Ward and his company Love Hertz that felt he could apply IoT to the flooding situation and help citizens and businesses better cope with these periods. So Ben's vision was to provide a cheap wireless water level sensor that can be placed over the back streams and brooks that weave themselves throughout Oxford. By monitoring the height of these streams, he could provide citizens with a much higher resolution of flood data and create, in some form, a personalised early warning system, along with providing new information on the best way to get to work, etc. The idea is that citizens adopt a sensor and they place it in their back gardens over the streams. Now, the Environment Agency, they obviously monitor the river, but they only do this at a few key points, such as near locks and so on. And their traditional sensor system is highly accurate, it's well maintained, but it's very expensive to install. And some personal experience, because I actually live in Oxford as well, around this area, you also tend to find that household damage is created by the back streams flooding and groundwater's rising, not the main river bursting its banks. So this seemed like a challenging and worthy IoT project to get involved with. So we decided to partner with Ben on taking this vision forward. And over the last year, we've tested a small number of sensors at a test site in Oxford and created a well-featured IoT backend to support it. By the end of this year, we aim to have the majority of streams and rivers in the area covered, ready for a potential flood this winter. And in many ways, we're only at the start of this project. It's very early on, but there's still an awful lot of knowledge we've gained to date. Okay. But Before delving into the flood network even more, I just want to quickly mention we're also working on another project called PIPS. Now, this looks at helping people to cope with early stages of dementia and involves a number of connected objects around the home, like the image above. So PIPS is a bit different to many assisted living devices out in the market because it's effectively a reminder system rather than a monitoring system. It's also technically interesting for us because it's a lot more actuation features than the Oxford Flood Network, which is at this stage mainly sensing. So if there's one message I'd like everybody to take away today, and it would be IoT is where the digital world meets the physical world. Whereas the digital world is clean, binary and logical, the physical world is complex and messy. That complexity may manifest itself in the form of a simple question of how exactly do you attach a sensor to a large disused gas pipe, to the more complex question of how do I trust the quality and the origins of the data of a sensor attached to a large disused gas pipe. And to demonstrate this, I've got two images here. One on the left is a web form, and the one on the right is the flood sensor. So the web form requires a user to type in the relevant data. There might be some mistakes, there might be even deliberate mistakes, but on the whole, this is a sanitized digital process where the hard work is done by the user. Now, the one on the right is the IoT data collection, and that's a different kettle of fish entirely. So in this case, the distance to the river is derived from the setting of the ultrasonic here. It's out here, there's a little ultrasonic sensor pinging a noise down to the river, and that being reflected back up. And there's an equation that relates the timing to the distance. But that also requires you to know the speed of sound in air. Unfortunately, the speed of sound of air is also related to air temperature. So you also need a temperature sensing unit. Now, we found out the hard way that the readings of the temperature is very sensitive to the position of the sun. So you need to point this thing either north or downwards to minimize these solar heating effects. And important, I say minimize because this is an analog system, not a binary one. So then you say you solve those hard problems, and you've got this river, it sits above the river nicely, and you're getting these readings out. Along come a gaggle of geese. Now, they decide to sit underneath the sensor, and the readings make no sense at all. But you don't know that. Sensor can't tell a goose from a shopping trolley or whatever's chucked into the river. And so in reality, you can maybe perhaps process this type of data in the short term, but it's a lot more difficult to interpret things when you have reed beds and stuff going out of the river. So you need a lot more intelligence somewhere in the pipeline to do a job that a human would do when typing in web form. So this then moves on to another lesson, and that is it's all about power. And it's about the complexity of the physical world and how that is driven by power. When we talk about IoT, we tend to think about the small battery-powered devices that are going to be everywhere. It's going to be ubiquitous, as they say. And there's lots of claims these things will last the lifetime of the unit, perhaps over 10 years. That may be the case, but I can tell you these sensors aren't actually doing a lot. There are severe limitations in running from battery, and features such as GPS, wireless comms, encryption, cameras, they all suck power and far too much of it. So what you end up with are sensors that come on at regular intervals, do their work, and go back to sleep again. And that makes communication that is initiated externally from the device very, very difficult to do. And monitoring anything real time is really, really, really difficult to do. Some people immediately say this problem can be solved by a charging method such as solar. Unfortunately, under a bridge isn't the best place to stick a solar panel. However, if you can get a powered wire to this device, you're away. The options and the capabilities and the features open up massively. But then, of course, flexibility disappears. And the costs go up because someone has to dig a hole somewhere to stick a cable in, along with all the paperwork and everything else associated with it, planning, etc. However, these constraints may be fine for a number of applications, and perhaps things like soil moisture monitoring and so on, or even flood networks may be fine. But my advice is, at this stage of the IoT evolution, make sure you dig deep into anyone's claims. Similarly, on practical matters, there's this great march towards the per dollar sensor. Now, microprocessors, memory, etc., are all driven by Moore's law or their equivalents of some sort, so the costs have dropped steeply. However, we found that the actual sensor module, in this case, let's go, I'll point over here, to the ultrasonic, the big thing there, that was the most expensive bit by a long shot. So the whole flood network sensor costs about £100 in components, but the ultrasonic is 65. And this is also true of things like air quality monitors. So the reason these things are expensive because they're easy to use, they're accurate, they're well calibrated, they don't drift, and in our case, they're waterproof as well. So they've not been ordered in the same quality, same quantity as perhaps as components of consumer devices, and so the prices haven't yet dropped yet. And I'm sure they will come down, but at the moment they seem to be the critical part. And this is quite simple. Please don't assume your IoT device will be locked away in a secure comms room. You need to really carefully think about the hardware protection of communication keys, etc., especially if your system drives critical actuation. However, I think the larger question here is, should the data derived from this device be marked as less trustworthy or lower quality than one derived from a secure location? Now, in terms of wireless connectivity, this title of this slide sounds quite positive. However, in my mind, it could also happily read, by which I mean there just isn't a one-size-fits-all solution for IoT wireless connectivity at the moment. In many ways, we all know this instinctively from how we use different technologies like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and cellular technologies for different devices that serve different tasks. However, there are plenty of new technologies arriving that claim to solve the IoT connectivity over short, medium, and long-range distances. And some of these things are along the lines of low-power, wide-area networks, and those are so-called mesh networks. And these even as part of the Oxford Flood Network, we've been rolling an experiment called around the TV whitespace technology, which is actually what you're seeing here, and that's a TV whitespace unit there. And so the issue is really around, the issue is all these devices and protocols seem to fight over three areas: low power, high data rate, and long range. And the reasons are numerous, some simply meeting different requirements, and in some cases regulatory. So for instance, the 868 megahertz ISM bands, there's a 1% duty cycle limit that really curtails the data rate of these new ultra narrowband systems that we're seeing. But it's really necessary there to minimize interference. But there are plenty of other practicalities that come into this, which aren't shown here, things like the size of the antenna needed. And the rule is, pick the right tool for the right job. That may mean using different solutions for the same application, but in different environments. So so now you have connectivity, what about the internet part? And I would say that this architecture here is pretty typical of a lot of the IoT architectures and platforms today. You have a sensor all the way down here. So this could be our flood sensor. It could be a Nest thermostat or whatever. And that talks some form of local gateway or an access point. And then this directs communication over the internet to a cloud service. And pretty much the internet bit is here. Everything else is up in a cloud service. So this is your typical walled garden silo or M2M architecture. And the device down at the bottom is locked into the system up here. Because these devices don't have little keyboards or screens as such, a lot of the information about what service it talks to is pre-configured on the device itself. So the owner of this device doesn't have any choice of which service it talks to. Now, many of these new hardware IoT companies are actually startups, and when they go to the wall, you're left with dead service and device. The environmental waste alone is worth considering, let alone the lack of consumer choice moving between cloud service providers. So in some minds, the architecture should look more like this, and there's a bit of artistic license here, so bear with it. It's pick and mix, and this breaks the silo model, with many components talking to each other over the internet. And there are a number of different operators providing lots of different solutions, hopefully opening up competition and innovation. But this is a lot harder to achieve, and perhaps the reality of the IoT is somewhere in between. And we certainly started off with the silo model in the last slide, and that's how we've been working. But some of the R&D work that we've been doing recently is starting to open up that, and we hope to talk about that in the next few months. And I would say if these areas here are kind of dominated by IETF and so on, and up here there's a lot of work around the W3C and the Web of Things Special Interest Group, which we're also involved with. However, a key challenge for this type of model is security. And obviously the security problem is much harder. There are many more points of vulnerability. So rather than being protected by a walled garden managed by a few operators, these systems are modular and run by many different service operators. However, if you look beyond the security, perhaps the argument becomes one of data interoperability, ownership, and provenance as it gets passed around from component to component. Am I running over time? I'll try, sorry. So to illustrate the complexities of this type of componentized approach, let's go back to our field case. In a componentized architecture, the end device will be managed and maintained by a system run by company A, which will be very different from the system monitoring and receiving river level payloads run by company B. So the question is, can you separate the data produced by the device from the data needed to manage and maintain the device? However, to manage the device, company A needs to know about the battery level on that unit, and that's managed and transferred as data in exactly the same way as the river level data, just perhaps a different endpoint. And that sounds pretty workable. Battery level data goes to company A, river height levels to company B. However, in the extreme case of a flood sensor mounted on a drone, this becomes an awful lot more complicated. And I'll go on to the next bit. So this brings me back, this brings me onto the end user part of the talk. And this is really to say that it's key that So there's a lot of excitement about IoT, how IoT will bring into a new era of automation and actual insight. But I think IoT is still mainly focused around sensing and providing high definition insight into the physical systems that we never had before. So the AI will come, but in the meantime, we need to think about how end users will interact with these systems to extract the information we want to make decisions about. So a very simple example here is that we wrote our own device management system to run on both mobile and desktop. Now, in the world of responsive web design, this is pretty obvious stuff, but actually there's a lot of subtleties that come into the design from using this thing in the middle of a field. In the middle of December, it's freezing, and to be honest, you need to get the whole process done and over it very quickly. And one thing we realized earlier was that if the IoT is about real world problems, then you must have an outlet for the subject matter experts for these real world problems to build their own solutions. We're not flooding experts, and well, we weren't at the time. We may have a lot more knowledge now. And so it's important that for the IoT to really evolve, you need to break down the technology barriers and democratize the problem-solving process so that people of different disciplines can really add value. And just a quick note on presentation. So this is the Smart Santander project in Spain that's been, I would say, pretty much groundbreaking in the smart cities world, with something like 2,000 sensors that have been deployed around the city. And it's a major technology success. But however, perhaps in this case, they were thinking a bit too generic. So just to finish off then, so on this note, so this is the Oxford Flood Network, and this is a screenshot of a live map that's been put together using our tech. So when we looked at a lot of maps, the main features usually stand out are things like roads, obviously for good reason. But actually we were interested in rivers and streams, and some of them weren't even mapped. So in this case, we had to build a process to take standard OpenStreetMap and then highlight the river sections rather than roads, and with colors to denote river heights. And it means you can get an instant overview of the situation in an intuitive manner. In many ways, this type of user interface, user interface details are quite subtle, a little technical, but they have a lot of impact. And another example here is the image of the deployed sensor. Just let's see here, it's a bit hectic. In the highlight box, and this image was taken during the deployment process, and it has a very technical use for the maintainer of the device, which is they have a reference to see what it was like when Person X installed it. However, when the flood network if a flood network participant comes to this fresh for the first time, it also provides them with a form of context. They start to see what the world is like around that sensor, what does it look like, and where it is. And so I think this is quite subtle, and I think it really brings us back to that bit at the start, which is really about the point on IoT is this bit about the digital world meets the physical. And so there's a couple of slides. Work with great partners who want to do the same thing as you want to do. In this case, we were at Hogacre Eco Park in Oxford. really care when we turn up the drone. And I would say, as a summary, just remember that key bit, the real world is complex and messy. IoT is quite hard. It's very easy to get involved with the internet part of it, but remember, actually, we're collecting real data. And the IT should be about breaking silos, good tools needed. I would say, this is my real call to action, is we need better use cases and case studies because there's very few of them out there. Thank you. Sorry for rushing that.
So I thought we should break at 2:30, so I thought if we've got a couple of questions, please. Thank you.
See how we call it.
Yep.
Dave Massell again, sorry. And my capacity as treasurer of the open source group of the BCS. We've done
Can you hold the microphone a bit closer to you?
We've done small projects, and we've got these little Arduino boards which are clones for about £8, which is a lot because you can get one as cheap as 60p on the last event we ran. But we've had children as young as 4 years old building Internet of Things projects on Arduinos because no one's told them they can't do it. So, I mean, it is possible that we could open up some DNS and actually have sentient DNS on these devices at home and make home networks self-aware. But my point is, it's there now, we're doing it, bit more budget, we'll do more. I've got a lady who wants to teach 12 to 17-year-olds how to make IoT jewellery in the maker workshops. And the point is it's there, but we seem to be missing the boat on the kids that are going to be the ones that are the users in 20, 30 years' time. And I think that's where we should be focusing. Give me the money now, and I'll give you the engineers of tomorrow.
Good point.
Don't answer that yet. We have another question over here. Did you want to? No? Anyone else want to ask a question? No? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Brian, sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, you're not going to answer that?
No, sorry.
I think it's a really good idea. Do you think it's a good idea?
What's it?
To give the kids...
Oh, sorry, I thought, yeah, it's absolutely, sorry, absolutely. Okay, I look embarrassed. Yeah, it's a great point, and yeah, it'd be interesting to know how you do that, but I completely agree.
So no, because we haven't got time. But what I suggest is, are you going to go to the plenary 3? Sorry, the Internet of Things number C. Yeah. So I think anyone who wants to hear about these fantastic kids, I love the idea of jewelry, Internet of Things jewelry. So I think if you want to go and hear more about that, that's the place to go, right? So we're going to break into this. Thank you very much.
No, okay. Thank you.